Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Purple Way podcast. My name is Faris, I'm your host, and today I have a very special guest, Lama Bouchema. How are you?
Hi, Paris. I'm okay. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. Let's start with your background. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So, I am a psychodynamic therapist
Mm-hmm,
based in the UK. I used to be based in Edinburgh, but now I work in Bristol as well. So, I'm still working in both places.
hmm
I have a private practice. So,
hmm
I work with clients who come to see me privately. We do online sessions and we do in person sessions. I also work with a lot of other organizations.
hmm
I would say mainly my work has been around working with refugees, asylum seekers, and people in war zones. But that's not to say, I'm not also working in private practice. It's kind of they work alongside each other
Yeah,
at the same time.
yeah. And from my research, I know that you did your postgrad diploma in counseling from the University of Edinburgh, and then also you're a member of the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy. Is that correct?
Yes, that is
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, that's amazing. The first question is kind of like, why does psychotherapy have a bad reputation? And this is more a tongue in cheek kind of question for you.
I think the opinions and the ideas around psychotherapy or therapy in general are changing. So
Mhm,
they're not how they used to be when I was maybe growing up, or maybe when my mum or gran was growing up, for example. So we're definitely heading towards a more positive direction in terms of how we understand therapy and how we judge it or we don't judge it. So I want to kind of start with this positive note, but also at
mhm,
the same time say that there is still a lot of misunderstandings around what therapy is or whether it works or not. These misunderstandings come from either people's own bad experiences. So
mhm,
they might have tried therapy and it didn't work, and then they made a judgment about it, and it's like, oh no, I'm not going to do it again. It doesn't work.
mm,
Or they might hear other people in their lives that have gone through therapy and it didn't work for them. So again, they made assumptions that this thing doesn't work for them. Of course, there's I would say, hopefully, it is dated by now, this idea
yeah,
of, you know, whoever goes to therapy is someone faulty or someone that needs to be fixed. So
mhm,
there is a judgment and assumption that a person who is in therapy is probably, having a lot of issues. Maybe they're so traumatized, they've not processed their life, so
mm,
there's something wrong with them. And I think we're not there anymore, or most people, or a lot of people, are not there anymore in terms of thinking about therapy and the process of therapy. If anything, I would say the younger generations, the way that they look at therapy is more like, oh, this is something that I'm doing for growth. It's something that I'm doing so I can understand myself better.
yeah,
But I think that's where that comes from.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because, like, for example, I only have like one friend who goes to psychotherapy, but like, I think the general idea maybe is like, if you go, if you meet someone and you say, hey, yeah, I go to psychotherapy, then it's kind of like raises a red flag, as you said, like, oh, what's wrong with you? You know what I mean? Why do you need to go to psychotherapy? But I like your point that, the younger maybe generation thinks of therapy as, well, we will touch on it, but I think, like, yeah, they have maybe a different perspective of what therapy is.
Mhm.
What would you say are some common misconceptions about psychotherapy?
Loads, I would say. There are
Loads.
loads of,
Yeah.
yes. I think the most stereotypical one when people think of psychotherapy, especially when you name it psychotherapy, not
Okay.
counseling or not therapy,
Yeah.
people think Freud, like
Mhm.
the chair, the couch, you're lying down, someone writing notes and analyzing you. And while some people maybe still do psychoanalysis in that way, I think
Mhm.
we moved away from that place of I'm the expert and I'll tell you what's wrong with you. I think that's one of the big ones. Another one is therapy is going to fix me. So I'm coming in to therapy to fix myself. There's something wrong with me. I'm going to
Mm.
go through this process and be fixed. So, I mean,
Yeah.
this mindset is really problematic altogether. But
Hmm.
therapy or psychotherapy definitely does not fix you. It allows you to understand yourself better and then see how you've been coping and how you can cope better, I guess. Other things that come to mind in terms of misconceptions, that therapists give advice. So I will go to this therapist and they will tell me what to do or how to do it, or they'll give me advice about how to go about my life. And I would say that is not what therapists do. We kind of work collaboratively with you with the assumption that actually you are the expert on your life. Not we're not the experts on life. Even though we have experience and that's important, we might make suggestions, but we're not going to tell you what to do.
That was a misconception I had, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
until you said it, because I really thought that, like, if the therapist does not give you advice, then what do they do, right? In that perspective, what would you say is psychotherapy? And, like, therefore, when should a person consider going, for therapy?
Mhm. So, I mean, I want to add one
Yeah,
misconception,
sure.
which is that people come to therapy when they're in crisis, and that is a
Hmm.
misconception. And that might also answer the question: when do people seek psychotherapy
Hmm.
or therapy? Because yes, some people do seek
Hmm.
therapy when they are in crisis. So maybe an
Hmm.
event has happened, or maybe they're feeling overwhelmed. But some people come for more self exploration, um, m- wanting a better understanding. So you can come to therapy at any point in your life as long as it
Hmm.
feels like it's the right time for you. Or maybe you're curious. So you want to
Hmm.
come in and you're curious about, oh, what is this process? Just
Yeah.
to demystify it for yourself. So, in terms of like the
Hmm.
time is whenever you're ready or whenever you feel you might need that support. Before saying um, something about psychotherapy, just to kind of maybe demystify the word and say what
Hmm.
psychotherapy is.
Hmm.
And I guess we use different words to mean the same thing. So you might hear people say psychotherapy, you might hear people say talk therapy, or therapy, or counseling.
Hmm.
And these are the words that we use in the UK mainly. So all of these mean the same thing. Therapy, a process that we go through to maybe work on ourselves or work to explore and unravel parts of ourselves. But psychotherapy as a word is like a broad term or an umbrella term for different modalities. So you have psychodynamic psychotherapy, which
Hmm.
kind of works on past relationships, the unconscious, and making it more conscious. There's the humanistic, where it's kind of more focused on the experience of the person, the kind of their frame of reference. There's CBT. I'm sure a lot of people heard about CBT
Hmm.
because it's one of the main ones that the NHS offers in the UK, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And then there's the kind of more eclectic slash pluralistic integrative therapy. So people use different modalities in their approach. So it's an umbrella term to
Hmm.
different ways of working with the self. But um, you can call it a treatment or a process of healing. That is
Yeah.
what psychotherapy is, in my opinion.
Yeah. 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 Of course. And then, let's say, for example, someone is listening to this and they're thinking, okay, this is interesting. I guess you did kind of said it a little bit with the timing, but when should they consider going to therapy and seeing a counselor?
Yeah. So I think it's a really personal decision.
Mm.
And people come at it at different times in their lives in different ways. I think therapy would be more successful. This is
Hmm.
an interesting word to use, but would likely to be more successful and actually work for the person if they make that decision for themselves. So if you're pushed to do therapy, if your partner is going, oh, you need to go to therapy, or your parent or a friend, then I don't think that is the best way to start therapy. So it needs to come from within, make that decision for yourself. As I said, it could be that you're curious. So you have
Mm.
curiosity. Oh, what is this? Let me try it out. that can be a way to start it. Doesn't
Yeah.
always mean that you will continue with it or that it will work for you, but it's some people come to therapy because they're curious. Sometimes people are in crisis, as I said, so
Hmm.
they might have been through an event just recently, so a loss, a breakup, or maybe they have exams and they're getting so overwhelmed, so they come in and the resources that they have in their lives don't work anymore. And I guess that's the core point, which is if you feel like you're so overwhelmed or maybe you're feeling lost, what you already have in your life doesn't work for you, is not supportive enough, maybe you might consider, okay, let me try counseling at that point, or psychotherapy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a personal thing. I think with my friend who is going now for about a year, I think he was just curious about it and then he just started. There was nothing wrong kind of with him. He just was curious. He had the resources to do it.
Mhm.
And he said, let me try it. And now he has been going for maybe 1.5 year. And he has found what you said before. It's like the awareness. He has found like more he has discovered more aspects of himself and now he better understands why he reacts in the specific ways that he reacts in different situations, and I think that has helped him to bring self-awareness to himself. On that, like from your practice as well, would you say more people come or start therapy to discover themselves, like why we are the way we are, or is it to find a solution? Again, you touched on it, like solution to a problem, right? Could be anxiety, depression, crisis, etc.
I'd say all of the above. It really
Okay.
is very personal and very
Yeah.
individual. And even for the same person, they might come to therapy at different points in their lives for different reasons. So they might come to begin with for anxiety. So they're experiencing heightened anxiety and it's affecting their life and they need, something to work on that bit or to work through that bit. So they find themselves okay in therapy, they work through that bit, and then they go away. They might come back and they're like, okay, maybe now it's time to kind of understand myself a bit more and kind of see who I am and why I'm kind of interacting and reacting in these ways. So I know that the answer is not very specific. It's not going to
Yeah.
give you maybe numbers, but people literally come for all of the
Yeah.
above.
For both. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, from a practical perspective, right? How do you go about, how does psychotherapy help, individuals discover new aspects about themselves, and find solutions? Like, what is the practical way of doing it through psychotherapy?
Yeah. So I guess it might help to kind of go back to talking about what therapy is like or what
Okay.
psychotherapy is like, because then that
Mhm.
demystifies the process.
Mm.
As I said, there are different modalities. Like CBT, for example, works more with it's shorter term. It works
Mhm.
more with what is actually let's say the most important issue for you to work on, and then you work on the behavior and kind of the thoughts that come with that. So you make changes in that regard, and then you have exercises that you take home and that you're doing on a weekly basis. Longer term therapy, or therapies like psychodynamic or humanistic or even pluralistic, it's more about a journey of kind of really understanding your world, your inner world, from your perspective. So it's
Mm.
like going on this journey, asking questions, especially at the beginning. As a therapist, you will have your therapist ask a lot of questions about you, about your maybe relationships with your primary carers when you were younger, what your relationships are like right now.
Mhm.
They might ask about the environment that you're in right now. So there will be a lot of exploration towards the beginning, and then we go more into, okay, so what is going amiss and what are the things that are not maybe working for you.
Mm.
And that's when we start to explore maybe the patterns, and I'm doing air
Mhm.
quotes because patterns is not always a helpful term, but it makes sense to use that. Or maybe we can call them coping strategies that you
Mm,
developed
mhm.
throughout your life to make things work for you.
Yeah,
So, and what works from them, what needs to stay, what needs to change and shift, and then maybe can we add more?
yeah. No, that's interesting because like with coping mechanism, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, right? But like I think it's from our childhood we start, depends on like where we grew up, the family that we have, the siblings, the social life that we have, and we create those coping mechanisms. And then because we start from such a young age, they become unconscious, right? Again, correct me if I'm wrong, right? I'm just speaking my mind here, trying to understand. And then we reach an age where maybe these coping mechanisms that we have do not really serve us, and they become a burden,
Mhm.
etc. So then, would you say that's, what you said with air quotes, patterns? First, we would have to be self-aware that we have these coping mechanisms that don't serve us, and then say, okay, cool, how can I change them? And then maybe one pathway would be to go to therapy and be like, hey, I have these issues.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's sometimes when people kind of notice, okay, so I've been going through my life, it's been working for me, and then suddenly it stops working.
Mm,
Or I start to feel resentment. One example is people pleasing, for example, that,
yeah.
people sometimes develop this. I don't want, it's not a habit, is it? Kind of a pattern of people pleasing because they had a
Yeah.
parent maybe that was critical, or a parent that
Mm,
needed a lot of kind of for the child to be very emotionally aware. So how is my parent doing? Oh, let me do something good because
mhm.
that will make my parent give me the attention that I need, or the type of attention that I need. This is a very simplistic way of looking at it,
Oh, okay,
but
cool. Yeah.
one way to look at maybe
Yeah.
why people pleasing develops. And then we become this, and this thing or this pattern
Mhm.
becomes part of our self identity. So we're like, oh yeah, I'm a good person, I do what people want from me, and it works because people like that, and people will give you feedback. And then it stops working, and then you start feeling resentful, and you
Mm,
start feeling like, why am I doing all of these things and I'm not able
yeah.
to receive?
Yeah.
And then that's when we kind of find ourselves in therapy going, hey, I thought I was a good person doing things for people, but does that work for me?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, like I think with people pleasing, because I think up to a certain point I have it myself, right? Like of course, like I think it's natural for people to want to be liked by other people. And I think maybe, I don't know, like if I can say, like the easiest or the simplest way to do that is by pleasing them, right? Treating them well, but then also, I don't know, like doing stuff for them. I don't know, like, like buying them the drink, or like, hey, like, don't worry, like on a social environment, like I will buy you a drink, it's fine, oh, you don't have to buy me one. And with the kind of like goal of like, oh, can you like me? But then of course then that can become, I guess, like damaged, because your reality now is like, oh, I need to do these good things and deeds for people to like me. And of course people will like you, but probably they will like you for the wrong reasons,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
maybe people don't prioritize that. So they might not see this as a big deal. They might just see it as something that you do. So they might take it for granted.
Mm.
And, in that process, usually people pleasers are abandoning their own needs and themselves. So, and people outside of us, or outside, well, I am also a people pleaser,
Yeah.
former. Um, yeah, people outside of us might look at that and kind of go, why are you doing that? I don't like that. And then that
Mm.
kind of comes up against, come, hang on, wait, what? I'm a good person. I do good things for people.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So on that, right? So how can someone recognize those type of patterns? Is it, let's say, negative thought or behavior, like, people pleasing, etc.? Do you think it's easy, or like, again, simple to recognize those patterns, or what does it require?
Is it easy? So the counselor in me wants to kind of bring that question back to you, but I'm not going
Sure.
to do that.
Uh,
um,
you can ask me. I'm an open book. Like I don't mind sharing my experience if you want, but
yeah,
we can. Yeah.
it might be helpful to kind of think about it from an experiential place, and I would invite not only you but people to kind of reflect on their lives and ask this
Mm.
the question: have you been able to recognize patterns in yourself?
Mhm.
When were you able to do it? Was it
Yeah.
helpful to do it yourself? Was it maybe journaling, when you're writing things down and then you're recognizing? You're
Yeah.
smiling. It looks like
Yeah,
that's the one for you.
yes, 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 yes. So I'm 28, right? So I started when I was like 16. I became quite self-aware and I went into that self-improvement kind of industry.
Hmm.
In the beginning, it was like, how can I,
Yeah.
become better at girls and etc. And then it was like more business, and then just in general, like, oh, let me improve myself.
Hmm.
But at 18, or I think, yeah, at 18 years old, I started journaling. So I have been doing it for about like, yeah, 10 years now. um, and I think that has helped me a lot with my self-awareness. But the thing is, even though I'm aware, and of course, like, I think it's only now after like 10 years of like kind of like writing my thoughts and etc., that I'm starting to recognize like, oh, I can change. Like,
Hmm.
I'm self-aware, but only now I'm thinking, I don't know, like, kind of the gears in my mind are like, oh, Paris, you can change. You can kind of like leave the reality that you're living and explore a new reality. So I think, to answer your question, I think it's, you can have the awareness, but it's still difficult to move to the next step, which would be to remove those negative patterns. Like, I still like talk negatively about myself, or situations, to be honest, not about myself. So yeah, I still haven't, I think I'm on that step. I need to take that, yeah,
Yeah.
that step.
Yeah. And, that's a great answer, because journaling can be one of the places where we can put our thoughts down, we
Mm,
can read it back, we can see
mhm,
it, and it can be helpful to see, oh, okay, so this is how I'm thinking or how I've been thinking. Especially looking back, it might be more helpful to look back rather than do it on a weekly basis,
mm,
meaning we're unlikely to see the pattern when we're so close to it. So, I mean,
yeah,
literally, if you put your palm really close to your eyes, you can't really see, but when you
yeah,
zoom out, it's easier to see.
yeah,
So you're saying now, reflecting back, you can say,
mhm,
oh, so this has been part of my life. Oh, and I can see where I can change, and that change is
yeah,
possible. And I think
yeah,
that is amazing that you're there. I would say that not everyone is able to do that. Journaling
mm,
is not for everyone. And also, sometimes we have blind spots, because the
mhm,
brain almost like integrates or assimilates part of our experiences into the background. They become too familiar, so we don't see them anymore. They're blind
yeah,
spots now. And I think that is when it is important to have someone else who maybe doesn't have a bias
mm,
to kind of come in and kind of see it with you. So it's not about them kind of saying, oh, pointing out, oh, look at this, look at that. It's about kind of reflecting things back to you. What you're saying, reflect it back to you, hold up the mirror, and maybe sometimes even kind of say, oh, have you thought about it in this different way that you might not think to do it yourself? But I think
yeah,
it is possible, but it's maybe more effective if we have someone else be part of that. And I want to add one thing, and it made me laugh when I kind of thought about it, which is that we do get that feedback from people around us usually. So people
mhm,
say, you keep doing this, when we are
yeah,
out, you keep doing this, or you keep saying these things. And I guess, while that is giving us feedback or saying, look at this pattern, we're unlikely to receive it. That's why when I say unbiased or someone who's not going to judge us,
yeah,
it's important, because then we're more likely to actually hear it and receive it.
yeah. That's so good. Let's dive into this, because basically, like, later on, I do have a question about friendships, right? But I think it's I think we can touch it over here. How can a friend, right, be unbiased and non-judgmental? Because, like, of course, everyone has, friendships, right? Could our friends be our psychotherapists, right? And I'm saying this because, like, I consider myself a good friend, right? And when a friend of mine comes to me and says, like, hey, like, this is a situation that happened to me and I don't know how to act it. And then you can go by like, oh, just do this, like, here's the solution. Or you can be like, okay, do you want me to listen to you, or do you want me to also give you advice? Can a friend give you unbiased advice in a problem, or how would you go about that?
Yeah. Well, the short answer is no. And
Okay.
I say this from kind of an experience of being a friend. So kind
I can
of
imagine. Yeah.
eh, being a friend, being a psychotherapist, and kind of having that expectation sometimes, oh, why don't you
Sure.
be my therapist? Or, and I'm like, no, I can't. And I will not be your
Yeah.
therapist because I am definitely biased. You're my
Yeah.
friend and I love you. And I'm definitely going to be on your side no matter what, if we're talking
Mm.
about relationship issues, for
Hmm.
example.
Yeah.
um, I might kind of challenge you and say, hey,
Mm.
you can't do this and do that. But at the end of the day, I feel closeness to you and my relationship to you feels important as a friend. So
Mm.
I am likely to, want to nurture that rather than, tell you what to do. Also, you will notice, I'm sure, Paris and people hearing us will notice that when you give your friends advice or when you tell them do this or don't do that, they don't listen. They just
Yes.
go with end up doing,
Yeah.
whatever they want to do. And
Yeah.
then that is fine, of course, they have free will, but
Mm.
that kind of can make us feel like, well, I gave you my time, and you might feel a bit kind of resentful towards the friendship because you're like, I'm giving you my resources and you're not really taking my advice.
Yeah.
And I think most of the time that's not what we need from our friends. What we need is to know that they're there to
Hmm.
support, to hear us if we need to be heard, and challenge us if
Mm.
if we need to be challenged, meaning, if we're not doing something um, great, or, if we're not showing up for ourselves, we want them to say, hey, I'm noticing you're not doing this, or you're doing that. But the short answer is no, we can't have our friends be our psychotherapists, because also there's something about holding boundaries. So if a friend becomes, has the role of a therapist, then that's a
Mm.
lot on them that they're not necessarily signing up for, and
Yeah.
they might not have capacity for. So it's important that, we're checking in with people, but also our friends are not our therapists. They're great to have
Yeah.
as part of our support system, but
Mm.
they can't take the bias away. They've had too many experiences with us not to
Interesting.
have a prejudgment about
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. That's interesting because, like, for example, kind of the follow up on that would be, so okay, so a friend of mine comes to me and says, hey man, like, this girl is ghosting me or whatever, right? What should be my reply to him? Do I reply with, like, I see, yeah, maybe you should ghost her as well, like, whenever she replies, wait 2 or 3 days? Or should I go, okay, how does that make you feel? So, but then again, if I were to ask him and challenge him, then I do probably take the role of the psychotherapist,
Hmm.
in quotes. What do you think?
Yeah. So I'm going to flip the question just a bit
Sure.
and then I will answer, I promise.
Yes.
But I'm going to flip it and ask you, if you were going to your friend
Hmm.
and you have been ghosted and you're like, gosh, man, I've been ghosted
Yeah.
by this person. What is it that you would like from your friend?
I would want them, because another thing I have is overthinking.
Hmm.
So I would want them to say to me that it's not a big deal
Hmm.
and to not stress over it.
Hmm.
Um, like it has happened to me, like late replies. And basically I have said, I have talked about it with a friend of mine, and he said, like, yo, like, she's just busy, like, chill, like, she will reply when she has the time. And then it's like, okay, cool. And then I move on. So I think for me, I need the confirmation that everything is fine,
Mhm.
and I can leave it. I can let it go, because like for me, that's what I have. Like I sometimes I find it difficult to let things go, and I just think about them like a lot. Like,
Mhm.
I wouldn't say obsessed. Well, it could be sometimes, but like, yeah, yeah, I can just get obsessed over small things.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So to me, I mean, the way that I'm kind of hearing this is, it's almost like there's a zooming in that happens. Like it's really
hmm,
like narrow focus on the replying or not replying, but also
yeah,
it's really relevant or related to you, the self.
yeah,
Like, oh, is it something that has to do with me? What is happening? Why is
yeah,
this person not doing this? Right. So,
yeah,
what you say is helpful to you is someone to be able to see it from outside of you. They zoom out from the whole situation, they see the whole picture, and are able to kind of put that into perspective of life. Oh, she's
yeah,
busy, or
yeah,
I don't know, she's on a train or whatever, right?
yeah,
So that is helpful to you. And that is one of the things that would be helpful for people, because we're all
mm,
individual and we operate in different ways. Again, you might have what you might need in the moment is someone to just say, gosh, that sucks. Why don't we go out for a drink?
yeah,
Right? So that you don't
yeah,
really need your feelings to be met, or you don't need to express your feeling. Or you might want to vent and kind of say all of the things that you're worrying about, and you want someone to hear you, but it's not necessarily always the case. So you might want to check in with the friend. Hey, how can I be helpful to you in this
yeah.
moment in time?
Hmm. And then it's up to our friends to be like, to have their own self-awareness and be like, yeah, this is what I would like from you. But then I guess like, we don't have to dive into it, because then I guess like it, I think it's a never-ending cycle. But yeah, if they don't have the awareness, then it's like you would have to pick like an answer based on their personality or like previous experiences, right?
That's
Or
one way. I
yeah,
think a safe bet would be also to just be there for them, meaning,
okay, yeah,
hey, I'm here. What would you like us to do? Or, I'm here, this sucks. Um, uh, do you want to talk about it? So kind of ask the
mm,
questions, give them options. If they're not engaging with that, then okay, we're just here. Let's watch a movie, let's do whatever.
yeah,
So it's important to remember that as a friend, it is not your role to kind of get it out of your other friend, say,
I
how,
see.
let me be helpful, because you want to be helpful if your friend wants your help. So
Yeah,
we don't want to seek that, if the friend maybe is not needing that help from us.
I think that's a very beautiful perspective to have on friendships, like be there for them, and like, just ask the questions, give them the options, and then they can decide what option they want to hear, or, et cetera, et cetera. Interesting. I like that. Yeah, I will take, yeah, because like, I don't know, like, I don't know if it's from the people pleasing aspect of me, but like, I do want to be a good friend. And I really value, like, I'm proud
Mm.
to say that I want to be a very good friend to the people that I like, and etc. So, kind of like knowing or having a better understanding how I can be a better friend. For me, that's I like that. I like that aspect.
Mm.
Um, let's see. Let's go back to like kind of the negative thought patterns and how we can recognize them, and etc.
Mhm.
After all that loop, but so what would you say are some techniques or exercises that you use with your clients to gain a better understanding of themselves?
Mhm. I guess the first word that comes to mind
Mhm.
is curiosity. So
Okay.
I think that's a great thing to have as a
Mm.
human being, to be curious about life, about yourself, about your patterns, or the ways that you behave and the ways that you exist. So I am curious with my clients about
Mhm.
themselves. I'm curious with them about how they perceive themselves. So we're kind
Yeah.
of because there is a self that is perceived, so this is how I feel I am to the world, and then there's the maybe the self that is perceived by other people, how I
Mm.
think people think about me, and then there's the self where you're the actual self, how
Yeah.
you actually are. Obviously there are so many different parts to the self, so I'm not just saying it's three things, and
Yeah.
everyone will have different parts. So I think it's about being curious, again, about the self, and
Mm.
maybe bring the focus from outside more into the inside. And for me, I always like to start simple with simple things. So ask yourself questions like, um, what is this feeling like for me in any situation? So say you're in a party meeting new people, how is this feeling for me?
Mm.
um, any sensations in my body, so kind of connecting to your body as well, not just thoughts.
Mm.
Maybe you will notice that you're overthinking in that
Mhm.
situation, so just be curious internally about yourself and how
Yeah.
you're feeling, what you're thinking, what sensations do you have. Again, it could be as simple as, what do I fancy eating? So kind of
Mm.
practicing how to ask yourself these questions, where it
Mhm.
starts from the self.
Mhm.
What are my needs? What are the things that I'm interested in? How am I feeling about certain situations? And then go outwardly. Because I think a lot of people think, how are people perceiving me? How am I coming across in this situation? Am I being this or am I being that? So really kind of external locus of evaluation, or external focus. So that's how we start with
Yeah.
internal, checking in with yourself, ask yourself these questions, and then come into the external and be curious about other people and how
Yeah.
you might connect with that.
Yeah. And is that also, would you say, one way to improve the relationships we have with other people? Like just being naturally curious about them and like getting to know them in a deep level, like in a proper level, rather than like staying like superficially.
It could be a way
Mm.
to do it for sure, but I would say it's important to not abandon yourself while you're doing it. So I'm not
Okay.
always externally focused and wanting to be curious about people and asking people questions about them without actually knowing myself. So I
Mm.
start with myself and then I reach out and I'm curious about people. And also it's important to know whether people want us to be curious about them or not, because we might want and
Okay.
seek deeper connection and understanding, but
Yeah.
other people might not want that, and they need a
Mm.
boundary around themselves for whatever reason. So we need to be respectful of that. So it
Yeah.
depends, I guess.
Yeah. When you said like, we want to make sure that other people are okay with us, kind of like being curious about them. Is that connected to the like attachment styles? Like someone can be avoidant, um, or is that a completely different topic?
I think everything is connected to attachment styles
Okay.
in
Yeah.
many different ways, without categorizing people in just categories.
Yeah.
But yes, I think some people, attachment styles might come into how much they want to be connected. They
Mm.
might want the connection, but then when they see that people are trying to connect to them, that might kind of almost like shut down something for them and make them want to kind of go away and not be in connection.
Yeah.
So yes, it might be that, but also people might be private. They don't want to have you know deep questions asked to them, and for them to answer.
Yeah.
But I guess if you're talking about friendships, maybe that is
Hmm.
different, because in friendships you want more, deeper connections, I guess.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on the person.
Yeah. And would you also say, kind of going back, in a romantic relationship, let's say, for example, okay, my friend who goes to therapy,
Mhm.
um, can therapy improve your romantic relationships as well? Like the more awareness you have about yourself and why you act the way you act, That will that have a direct impact on your romantic relationships?
I would say yes.
Mm.
I don't know if it's a direct correlation, but
Yeah.
it will be in some ways. But yes, of course, when you are self-aware, it means that you're making, let's say, more informed choices about how you're showing up for yourself
Mm.
and for your romantic partner. So if I'm self aware, I'm more likely to, for example, attend to my needs and not
Mhm.
expect my partner to be the person who attends to those needs, right?
Yeah.
Or I might know how to ask and
Yeah.
communicate to my partner, you know what? This is something maybe that I need more, or that maybe we can work together towards. So the more self awareness, the, I guess, better.
I love your answer because, like, for example, this is something now again I'm discovering for myself regarding romantic relationships, and it's like I get it, like it's an interesting one because like throughout my life I have put a lot of effort on my romantic relationships, and then it's like, okay, why do I do that? You know, um, but yeah, like asking or like also being open about your needs. There are ways that you can ask for your needs to be met,
Mhm.
but then also how do you balance communicating your needs without sounding demanding? Demanding would be like, I want this, or
Mhm.
you're not showing me enough love, or you're not, like, doing enough.
Like, where's the line between being demanding and asking
Yeah.
something from someone and
Mhm.
communicating your needs?
Yeah.
Because they're two different things. Even kind of when we name them, they feel
Mhm.
different. When I'm saying, do this for me, or do more of this, or you need
Yeah.
to do that, that's like a command. You need to do
Yeah.
this, otherwise, you're not meeting my expectations.
Mm.
And it's not really helpful because that will kind of make the person be defensive and not want to connect or be close to us, because we're telling them you're not doing something or you're doing
Mm.
something wrong. That's not helpful. It won't be helpful to you either, so no one will
Yeah.
find this helpful. But if we're kind of coming at it from a perspective of, this is what's missing for me, or, oh, I'm feeling like I really need this. This is a need that I have. I need physical touch, for example. That
Mm.
makes me feel really good.
Yeah.
And I would love it if we can create more opportunities to do that. So it's kind of coming from a perspective of, this is how I feel, this is where I'm at, and I would like us to find a way together to make that happen without it being an expectation that your partner is going to do that for you. Because if
Yeah.
they can't do it, then we can have questions around, okay, how important is that for you? Is this working? Is it workable? Can we work through this? So it's not a demand, it's an expression of, this is
Mm.
my need.
Yeah.
And also with a suggestion of how this need can be met, because people can't guess how to meet your need. You can tell
Yeah.
them, I want this, or this is how I feel, or what's missing for me, but you can't leave them there.
Yeah.
You have to suggest ways that might work for you, um,
I
and be
see.
open
Okay.
for them as well.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Because like, yeah, it's not enough to say, "Hey, I need more," let's say words of affirmation. It's maybe I want specific words of affirmation, or like, for example, finishing a call and saying like, "Hey, goodbye," hugs and kisses, or something like that.
It,
That's what you
it,
mean,
it
right?
might it might be more, this is a way that works for me.
Yeah,
You just put it out there, and then you need to give them the opportunity to find the way that works for them, so they
yeah,
can
I
they
see.
can attend to that need for you. Because again, we don't want it to be prescriptive, do this or do more of this.
Mm,
You might say, it might be nice for me if you, I don't know, send me texts, with
yeah,
words of affirmation, for
yeah,
example. um, but I would say, relationships are give and take. There are two people, so there will be needs on the other side as well, and there needs to be ways to communicate and understanding for the other person and their perspective, because they won't come from the same place that we're coming from.
today we have so many expectations from other people, and it's like, oh yeah, like I want my partner to be my best friend, I want them to take care of me, I want them to be the love of my life, ta 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 ta. like so many expectations, and like it's you cannot fulfill them all of those expectations. So it's like, finding the balance between, okay, what expectations are realistic to have from my partner, and the rest I will have to fulfill for myself with, with friends, or with social life, or with, like, by myself. But yeah,
Absolutely.
with the assumption, kind of like, we are the result of our genetics, childhood, and like experiences, right? And we touched on it, but like, how important is it to reflect on our past, starting from childhood all the way to our adulthood, to kind of understand ourselves, would
Yeah.
you say?
So, I mean, if you ask different therapists, they will have
Hmm.
different answers
Okay.
because some people are very much kind of here and now focused. And some people kind of, the way that I practice is psychodynamically. So I am interested in your past and kind of
Mm.
your past relationships. And we know, neuroscience tells us that these connections and these primary relationships that we have when we are younger, helps develop the connections in our brains. So it is literally affecting how our brain develops up until a certain point. And obviously the brain is plastic, so there's plasticity, it changes through other relationships. So that is my belief,
Mm.
is that all of these experiences that we've had as children, primary relationships. So,
Mhm.
it could be a parent, or it could be, I don't know, a grandparent, whoever was really present for you or not present in your childhood, will have affected who you became or who you have become as an adult. And that includes how you relate in the world and how you view yourself, how you talk to yourself. It affects how you relate to other people as well. And that kind of brings maybe if we're talking psychodynamically, the unconscious and the kind of the conscious. So how you unconsciously relate to people in a certain way because maybe they remind you of someone in your childhood. So you're reenacting some of the things or some of the patterns from your childhood. So again, that is the way that I find helpful in my practice, but also in my personal way of thinking about life.
Mm.
But it's also important to say that it's not only the relationships, it's also the circumstances, because sometimes we go away from the circumstances. So someone maybe growing up in poverty, or someone growing up in a war zone, is not gonna, even if they had, great parents that were there for them, the environment is going to affect how
Mm.
who they become or how they see the world or how safe they feel in the world.
Yeah, 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 yeah. How would you interpret the statement, "Be comfortable in your own skin," and from a, again, from a psychotherapeutic perspective?
How would I interpret it? I think for me, being
Hmm.
comfortable in my own skin, or for someone to be comfortable in their own skin, is about the internal dialogue.
Hmm.
So, if our internal dialogue or internal narrative is critical, is always kind of not happy about us, is making us feel not good enough, then we're not really comfortable in our own skin. But if the internal monologue or dialogue, let's call it, is kind, nurturing, compassionate, then it will be more accepting of however we show up in the world. So even when we show up in ways that we're not happy about,
Hmm.
if our internal monologue is going, oh shoot, we effed up, or we made a mistake here, it's different from, oh gosh, we're such a horrible human being for making these mistakes and never improving. So I think for me, that is one of the core things to have to be comfortable in our skin.
Yeah. And would you say, is it easy to change our inner monologue or our dialogue? Go from negative pattern into, or like, negative talk into positive talk.
Uh, is it easy? I don't know if it's easy, but
Yeah.
it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
And I think it takes practice. It
Mm.
takes more self awareness. It takes us a kind of a reframing of our mindset around how we view ourselves. And I think,
Mm.
being more accepting and compassionate and kind towards ourselves will help with that. But it takes practice. I mean,
Yeah.
it might be very easy for people, but it might take longer and not be so easy
Yeah.
for other people. And I want to add one thing to that kind of, let's say, negative or that critic in ourselves, that
Mhm.
the way that I see it, and maybe other people will agree, is that this part of you developed um, to protect you in some way or
Mm.
another. It developed because maybe you had, and I'm not saying you, I mean
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
you, the general you, that maybe we had a critical parent, and then we
Mm.
had to internalize that to be able to protect ourselves and keep ourselves in check, do the things in a right way. You should do this, why
Yeah.
didn't you do that? Again, so the function of that part of you was meant to be positive.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't show up in a helpful way. And that's why we want to kind of retire the
Hmm.
critic and kind of bring in a more nurturing, compassionate and kind and challenging part of ourselves. It doesn't have to all be like positive and
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah. Mm. Another one is the flow state. There's a professor who talks about the flow state and says, like, people perform at their best when they're in the flow state, which is like slightly above, like, the challenge, right?
Hmm.
The difficulty. Or flow state is where you perform just outside your comfort zone,
Hmm.
just a little bit outside your comfort zone. And that's where you will be at your best.
Hmm.
So yeah, it will take practice. Yeah, and again, going back, that's something I'm trying to do now. What are other resources that you would recommend to people to go alongside either psychotherapy or, like, even before that? Like, how can we become more self-aware? Like, what would you recommend?
What I would recommend. So, to become more self aware, I would say start, like I said, before, is, start with getting to know yourself. Ask
Mm.
yourself, questions when
Hmm.
you're having experiences. Ask yourself, wow, how am I feeling about this? Or what are the sensations that I'm having, or
Mm.
maybe what do I think about this? If it's
Mm.
a political thing or if it's an issue that people are talking about. So start with that place of asking yourself these questions, because through these questions you're gonna become to understand and know where you stand. And of course, it's important to remember that the self, or who we are, is not a fixed entity. So
Yeah.
it's ever changing, it's growthful. So what I might think now or feel now about certain things might change in the future. And that's fine, because we're human, and we have a lot of experiences that changes us, and hopefully opens up our horizons. I would also say, you know um, put yourself in situations where you're having more experiences. Be in the world, like experience the world. It's not about
Yeah.
how you think about yourself. It's not about always checking in with yourself. It's also about having experiences, because you learn a lot about yourself through relationships with other people
Mm.
and through experiences that you have, especially new experiences. So go off in the world and have more experiences is what I would say. In terms of resources, I will give you, and I wrote them down because I'm not great with remembering
Nice.
names.
Yeah.
So I will kind of give you some things that I found helpful.
Hmm.
Important to say that it might not be helpful to everyone, so just take it on board. If it resonates, great. If not, it's not for you, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But before I kind of tell you some of these things, it's important that people, when they're approaching a podcast or a book, if the way that the book is portrayed is more from a perspective of, if you do this, you're going to feel like this, or if you do this, it will change this, then I would have a question mark around that book. So this self improvement, do this so you can change da 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 da, might be slightly helpful for some people, but it might also not be helpful, or helpful for a period of time, and then it might even make people feel like, oh, I'm a failure. I tried this and it didn't work. It means there's something wrong with me, right? So I guess this is a disclaimer before
Yeah.
I give out the uh, suggestions. Let me find them. Okay. So, so I have YouTube suggestions.
Okay.
I have a podcast or podcasts,
Uh-huh.
and I have books, all that I
Perfect.
find helpful.
Yeah.
Most of them are very accessible, as in, very kind of simple. Everyone
Hmm.
will understand. They're very informative. So, in terms of YouTube, there is, I think, a channel called Therapy in a Nutshell.
Okay.
Very informative, bite size, but also if you want to expand, there's a lot of resources. There is also Dr. Julie Smith, which I'm sure people will have
Okay.
come across her videos on social media.
Hmm.
She has a YouTube channel and a book, which I will also mention. Dr. Dan Siegel, you will find
Okay.
him on YouTube. He has a lot
Uh-huh.
of books as well. So he talks about the brain and the connection of like neuroscience and therapy. In terms of books, um, Dr. Julie Smith's book,
Hmm.
Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before?
Okay.
It's very informative. It has exercises, so you can kind of go through it, and it really explains, some of the things that you might be going through, like anxiety, depression, negative thinking, etc., etc. Attached is a good book. I found it good. I don't know if people
Okay.
will find it good. I think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
by Dr. Ari Levine and Rachel Heller. Sorry if I
Hmm.
butchered the names. And I think there's a book also that is easy to read. It's called The Book You Wish Your Parents Had Read, Philippa
Ah,
Perry.
okay.
And sorry, this is a really long list I'm noticing, but
Okay.
the podcasts,
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
therapy edit, therapy
Uh-huh.
chat, and mentally yours. Again, not too long,
Yeah.
but informative.
Yeah. No, interesting. I do love books and podcasts and etc. So I will have all the list down on YouTube for people to find that, because I think I have heard Attached. I have heard about the book Attached.
Yeah,
I haven't read it, but
yeah.
yeah, it's good.
It's a good read, but again, anything that you read or any resource that you kind of use, just see if it resonates with you. Just see
Yeah.
if it kind of works or if it's helpful. Because if it's
Mm,
not, don't try to fit yourself into it. Just
I see.
take what works for you, is my
Yeah.
advice, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, for sure. I only have a couple more questions. During the weekend, I was just doing like some last bits of research, and I saw, as you said, like in the beginning, you're in Bristol, and I believe you work with the Trauma Foundation Southwest in Bristol, and you have also been part of a study from the University of Edinburgh to understand the mental health needs of Syrian refugees who have relocated in Edinburgh. Um, I would love to see your perspective, your experience, and how is that, yeah, how has that experience been like for you to talk to these people and, you know, getting a feeling and understanding the effects the war has on their mental health.
The way that I think I would like to put it is that
Mhm.
as a psychotherapist, I show up differently
Mm.
with the work that I do with someone maybe who's seeking asylum. Because, as I said before, your environment and the situation that you're in will impact how you are in the world or how safe you are feeling. So if your environment is not stable, if it's not safe, then you won't really ready to kind of do the psychological work, because you're
Mm.
so preoccupied with, I need to be safe, I need a home, I need to be settled. And it's the same for war zones. So I think the type of work is quite different from that perspective, is that we can't take the maybe Eurocentric psychotherapy and say, oh yeah, let's have individual therapy, or let's do it in that way. But I think what might be helpful sometimes in those situations is so normalizing the
Hmm.
responses that people might be having. So a lot of people will have PTSD symptoms, or they might feel like they can't really function in the world because of the
Hmm.
things that they've been through. Um, so kind of normalizing the response, because that is a response to a really horrific situation that they've been in. So it's not about kind of telling them, oh, do this and do meditation and do that, because that's not going to work for them. It's about
Yeah.
letting them understand that this is a response, and that there is a way out of that, as in healing will come, but it takes time to kind of
Yeah.
build towards that place where they can start that journey of healing. Again, it's
Mm.
a completely different perspective. But also the other thing that is added to that is the cultural difference. So people are coming from different cultures, their understanding of, or whether they take psychological um, or mental health, let's say, uh, into consideration or not, comes into that culture, because some cultures don't really acknowledge mental health. It's, you
Mm.
just get on with it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
maybe that's helpful, but, sometimes it's not helpful when you're not doing well. So it has to be culturally informed. Again, i
Mm.
can't i can't meet them in a like, oh, this is the setup of the session that we're going to have. It's okay, how do we find a way that this works for you? How can I maybe do some psychoeducation so we can understand the self? And that's what we do, both in counseling, but also with React Refugee Scotland, which is
Yeah.
the study with Edinburgh University, where we run groups that are culturally informed.
Hmm.
It's more about kind of mental health awareness and inviting people to start that journey to understand themselves. Yeah, again, rather than the 1 hour one-to-one session. Yeah,
How has that been for you as a person as well? Like, listening to their kind of perspective and their stories.
I get this question a lot.
Uh,
I sometimes get it from people that I work with. Does working with people who have been through horrific
mm.
events or horrific traumas change how maybe I show up for someone maybe who's coming into my private practice? And my answer would be no, it
Hmm.
doesn't change that, because I feel like I show up to each person in a very specific way that kind of works for that person.
Hmm.
And I show up for every need in the same way as a practitioner. But in terms of have I been changed? 100% yes,
Yeah.
because the enormity of what people go through kind of puts a perspective on you, on your life, on your struggles. It doesn't
Mm.
take away, the value, or it doesn't take away the struggle of what you go through, but it kind of, it's again, it's almost like you're zooming out and you're seeing a whole picture of like, oh, there's a lot of different experiences of suffering.
Yeah. 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 There are different realities, and I think potentially here in Edinburgh, or like the West, or Europe, I don't think we understand the reality that other people in other parts of the world live.
Yeah, I mean, there
Well,
is a disconnect. I think that's what I'm hearing you say, that sometimes
yeah.
there might be a disconnect. And that is true for everyone, by the way. So it's not just
Yeah.
in Europe or being away from someone's experience. It's sometimes a way that our brains cope, or our nervous
Mm.
copes with something, as horrific as, a video of, I don't know, death, or a
Yeah.
child suffering.
Yeah.
So the brain kind of goes, okay, let's disconnect from that so we can keep ourselves safe. That's the function of our nervous system. And that's
Yeah.
helpful for us, but
Yeah.
it's not helpful in terms of like, maybe it's not helpful in terms of like keeping in touch with the reality of what's happening and maybe taking action if we want to take action in some way or another. So that's why kind of being on the edge of like challenging ourselves without
Mm,
overwhelming ourselves is important.
yeah,
And that will look different for different people. So it's not about seeing the videos all the time because that's overwhelming and that's not helpful. It's
yeah,
about maybe making connections in different ways or, yeah, taking action in different ways. Again, if people want to take action, because some people might choose not to.
yeah, 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 yeah. And then it becomes a personal choice.
Yeah.
What is one thing you wish everyone could take from our conversation? Maybe not even from our conversation, but like from, a psychotherapy perspective. What's one thing that you would like people to, start act upon or something like that?
Yeah. So I think maybe act upon, not a way that I would put it, because that's the person that I am. I'm not about do this or do that. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think one thing that I would like people to take away in general
Mhm,
is that, a sense of movement and fluidity
mhm,
when it comes to the self, the way that we perceive ourselves. Because if we have a sense that the self is changing, then we're more likely to be accepting of that change, but also we're more likely to know that we're not a fixed entity. So if
mm,
there are bits about myself or parts of myself that, that I don't particularly like, or that I want to add to myself, then that is possible. So you're not stuck where you are. You can always make shifts and movements, and be more of yourself.
yeah. That's a good way to put it, and a good way to kind of finish our conversation. So, Lama, where can people find you and reach out?
They can Google my name and then they will find my profiles. So
Perfect.
on different platforms, it's Lama Bouchema. I'm sure you will
Mhm.
have it.
Yeah.
I'm also on Instagram, kind of as a practitioner, not very
Mhm.
active, but
Okay.
I am there, and people can contact me there, at lama.counseling.
Hmm.
And of course, I'm again on LinkedIn, so all of the above.
Perfect. No, thank you so much. I really found our conversation insightful, and I think, you know, it's definitely not like a fast step to psychotherapy, or like, kind of like building self awareness, but I think it's important for people to take that leap and really, get to know themselves.
I'm with you
Yeah.
100%. Taking the leap is a really beautiful way of doing it because it is about, experimenting, try things out. Psychotherapy is one of the things. So, if you're curious about it, and I'm talking to people in general, try it out. If,
Yeah.
of course, if you can afford it, it's not a cheap thing to
Yeah.
just try out.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for the conversation, Paris. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah. No, thank you so much.